everybody, Composing Gloves here, and today I'm going to show you how to save system resources using freezing tracks or bouncing tracks to save CPU. So this is something that is really nifty. So what this is, let me make sure I'm recording real quick. I am recording, so I'm good to go. What this is basically so I have Kontakt loaded up here. I've got several instances of Kontakt loaded up, and they are playing a track I wrote for a fancy brass library I just bought. It's the Symphonic Brass by Spitfire. And what part of the using Kontakt is, it's got to load all these samples up, and as a result, sometimes it could take a while to load a project. So once I have a project done, and let's say I want to give it to someone else to maybe spend time mixing and making it sound like really nice, I'd probably want to bounce some stems for them. Or let's say that my computer's like crackling and popping and I have CPU issues falling out of the sky, and I don't want to increase my buffer size because I'm using my MIDI keyboard to record. So what do? How do I get my samples? Blah, 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 like I'm freaking out. So what you do, this is what you do. So first off, here's the issue. See, I can't have that happening when I play, and some people will be like, "Oh, just record it in Edison." But if I record that in Edison, it's gonna sound like that. So what I'm gonna do is first I'm gonna optimize this plugin because it's third party for recording. So I have it going to separate mixer tracks. I want to hit this button here though, notify about render mode. You open up here's Kontakt, right? You got to go to the cog, and you'll be taken to this menu. Then go to processing. And make sure notify render about rendering mode is on. This tells Kontakt, hey, we're rendering, use your render settings. Because NFL, all the native plugins are automatically told this, but some plugins don't receive this command unless you have an option enabled. I believe Zebra will use oversampling if you enable this option. So plugins, third-party stuff needs to be told this in order for it to really work. So sometimes if you don't do this, it'll even render the samples. Not only will it render the samples halfway sometimes, but it will not render them. It will not render them in time. They'll be out of time sometimes. I didn't have that issue, but I saw some people were having that issue. So this will fix those issues. So now I didn't know about this for the longest time, and I was rendering tracks, and I basically would just render it until I got one that didn't mess up. And man, that friggin' sucked. And then I learned about this button, and I was like, what? So now I know about this button. Use that button. Oh man, it helped me so much. So basically I have that on. I don't know if I have it on all of them. In the template I do, but this is a project that I was experimenting with this template at first. See, they're not on. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then we're going to bounce some stems out, okay? So let's just bounce our horns out. So let's say I want to create the horn tracks, right? Well, I go through, I look at my horns, and I have a couple options. Let's say I want to bounce a horn subgroup. Well, I have them subgrouped right here, so I'm going to record enable that. It's because I'm going to bounce all the audio that's coming through here, it will be bounced. And then I want to record enable these. We'll do these 3 tracks, right? So I'm going to get 4 stems out of this. And when I record them, I'm going to bounce them. So if you were to record these things, why don't you just put an Edison over each one and record that? Well, I'd record all that junk crap that was happening. So what I could do is I can render the settings. And so what it'll do is it will only render these files and output them as separate files. So I can bounce the stem. So I simply just record enable whatever I want to bounce as a stem. If you're sending to sends, make sure you record enable those too, because you want those as separate things. It's only going to record the inserts and whatever's coming down that channel. It's not going to record everywhere else it's going. So you're going to want to record enable your sends too, so you can include your sends in with your thing, and it'll sound the same because it's going out unless you have it set in parallel. If you have it set unless you have it set in serial. If you have it set in serial, just record the one thing it's coming out of. If it's set in parallel, you need to record enable them both. That should be pretty self-explanatory though. So I've got these things now there, and I want to avoid these issues, so I'm going to render out these tracks for the whole thing. That way, when I upload this project later, it will load up pretty fast, and it'll just be great. So I'm going to hit. If you go over here to disk recording, you'll see there's render to wave files. I am just going to hit Alt-R. That's the shortcut for it. And it will bring you to this thing, and it's basically gonna render these. And I want to render the full song, and I want the wave depth there. This looks good. The resampling has to do, I believe, with if you are pitch shifting something. So this theoretically doesn't matter. But if you like time stretch something or whatever, this will time stretch it in a fancy way and make it sound like it would be really accurate, I guess. So one other thing about this is separate from the rendering going on inside FL. This isn't like the same thing as rendering out your track. It sort of is, but it's not. And you don't want to dither it because that's something you apply at the last stage. So we're going to hit start, and it's going to bounce them. And so, yeah, in the future, I will not need to open those. And I want to save the MIDI, but there's also some things I can do now to save CPU as well. Let's say if I want to add more parts, if I'm fighting something that takes a lot of resources, there they are. And look, they just popped up. And so if I open them up, there they are, the 3 parts, and they are bound to stem. So you can now give this project very easily to someone else. Oh, this one is the submix, the Rise of Brass, Brass 2. These ones are brass, bass trombone, horn 3. That's another thing. You want to name your stuff before you bounce it. Another thing is these things are all getting sent to 92. I don't know why they go to 92, but they go there. So just send them to not 92. Why not 92? That's my problem. That's where I have a send. I don't know why they get sent there. But anyways. Now I can come in here and I don't need to play it out here. I could simply just bounce everything like this. Or I might want to bounce that one part to save CPU, and then I can just remove that one part or move it to some place where I don't need to see it or use it. So you can save system resources because it's much more effective to do it this way. It saves so much on everything. Doing it this way is not very effective. Now, if I go later in my track, I can take out all the brass parts. And if you're using Kontakt, you can even purge the samples. So if I went into horns, if I went into my brass section now, I could like go into each brass section. I could hit purge and I could purge all samples. That would remove all samples from my RAM. And that way they're not loaded up. I have a lot more space now available to me to load up other samples, and I can go on with my workflow. And now I don't plan to affect these samples dramatically. And if I want to, I'll just save the MIDI somewhere else. And then if I like desperately need to change a part, I can always go in and change it later. Now I pretty much always stay in MIDI because I just increase my buffer size with stuff like this. But if you're running out of CPU usage, maybe you have a ton of unison and chorus that you just have to have on this one plug, well, then you can do that and you can have the sound you want and you can still continue to work without it being too much of an issue. So pretty cool stuff. If you have any questions about this, let me know. So again, you just record. Basically, I explained a lot of the philosophy of it, but basically you just record enable them. Oh, this would be a spot where you'd probably want auto unarm engaged, because then after you render, they will automatically unarm, and you can go on with your your day. So again, Alt-R, you just record enable them. You hit Alt-R. It's pretty easy. Make sure you have it on whatever you want to bounce, and that's all. Subscribe, support me on Patreon, and have a blessed day.